In Arash Aramesh, he is a national security and foreign policy analyst. Good to see you, Arash. Okay, it's not just the Saudis who are saying that this missile is coming from Iran. We're hearing the same from the United States. This is the US UN ambassador, Nikki Haley. Listen to this.
While we don't yet have sufficient insight into this particular attack, it bears all the hallmarks of previous attacks using Iranian-provided weapons. It is only a matter of time before one of these missiles hits the target.
Yeah, and this missile was aimed right at the heart of Saudi power in Riyadh. So if it is Iran, what's the end game here for Iran?
Iran is engaged in a deep proxy war with its regional rival, Saudi Arabia. So if you look at the range of Iranian allies where Iran has supplied weapons, sent in military advisors, and has spent billions of dollars, not to mention thousands of soldiers that have died. You can count Iraq, you can count Syria, and since the 1980s, you can count Lebanon. Iran has expanded its sphere of influence and has opened a new front against the Saudis in Yemen. After the Arab Spring in 2011, the government of the late President Mohammed Abdullah Saleh, who was recently actually killed by the Houthis, his government collapses. Post-collapse, the Houthi rebels who have been fighting the central government of Yemen now for generations, formed sort of a really odd coalition with Saleh and his outcast sort of government. And they managed to get the new government run by Vice President Abdurrab Hadi, who was now the new president, out of the capital, Sana'a. This is definitely a power play that Iran is trying to exert more pressure on the Saudis, try to take the war to Saudi borders. Having said that, it's a really risky move. Now, it's not exactly clear who supplied the missiles, but despite the fact that Nikki Haley and the president and his administration don't have much credibility at the United Nations, again, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that the Houthis probably got their weapons, and especially got the Scud missile from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Force, or the IRGC.
Are there concerns or questions, at least, about the effectiveness of Saudi's air defense capabilities? Because it now seems there's a clear and direct threat to major population centers in Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely. The last two attacks were hitting parts of Riyadh. Riyadh is the capital. There are some major population centers in Riyadh. And what if one of these missiles actually lands on a target? And as you know, actually, these Scud missiles are not very accurate. They're not cruise missiles. They are Scud ballistic missiles. They're highly inaccurate. But their payload can actually cause some damage, and with it carry some civilian casualties. What would happen next? The question is, what would happen next? If the Saudis decide to retaliate, would they retaliate against the Houthis? Well, they've been doing that now for almost 2 years, bombing Yemen on a daily basis with their coalition partners, including the United Arab Emirates. What happens if there is a direct confrontation and a direct conflict between the Saudis and the Iranians? And then what would happen in that case? What are we going to do? Are we going to actually get involved and take sides here? And what would happen when this regional proxy war turns into a regional direct war between the Iranians and the Saudis in the Persian Gulf and also around the Middle East?
Yeah, there was this report by the UN Secretary General which found that Iran, came out on Tuesday, is in compliance with the nuclear deal, but at the same time, Iran is defying that call from the UN to hold its ballistic missile program. I guess the key here is that the UN called on Iran to hold the missile program. It was not seen as binding, at least as far as the Iranians are concerned. But we're now hearing from Nikki Haley, who's demanding the international community step up and stop the Iranians from spreading weapons across the region. Is this a backdoor way to scuttle the Iran nuclear deal?
It is and it's not. On the one hand, the ban on missile tests was never included in the very text of the Iran nuclear deal. Having said that, it was one of the very clear demands of the international community for Iran not to take any provocative actions, including testing new missiles, testing new mid-range ballistic missiles that can target Israel, Europe, or for that matter, short-range missiles that are being provided and supplied to Hezbollah or the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Iran has not ceased to be sort of in terms of its regional ambitions and extending its regional sphere, sphere of influence. It has not stopped its regional ambitions. Having said that, if you just look at the Iran nuclear deal, yes, I'll give it to you. The Iranians have not done a thing to violate the Iran nuclear deal. But again, some people would question that the very spirit of the Iran nuclear deal would call for Iran not to antagonize its neighbors and not to antagonize our U.S. allies in the region. But you also got to look at the other side of the equation. The Saudis here have not also been very honest players. On the one hand, the Yemen, the poorest country in the Arab world, has been under constant bombardment now for 2 years. There is no real clear solution and no exit strategy. To add to that, Saudis also have not supported some of the sort of moderates in the region. For years and years, they have been supplying, supporting, and helping and aiding and assisting some of the worst radical Islamist elements in the region. But again, the war here, the fight here is between Iran and Saudis, and it's really hard to see what the outcome will be, especially if there's going to be a U.S. involvement, which I certainly hope there wouldn't be one. But the end is anyone's guess at this point.
It's a tough neighborhood, to say the least. Arash, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.